Hey, y'all. It's good to be hanging out with you. I wanted to let you know about in today's episode, we're going to be talking more about the full disclosures. And specifically, I want to give you a heads up that the conversation is going to be around what actually a full disclosure looks like, what preparation goes into it from the person did the betraying, what they're going to be doing, what that process looks like. And then also, many people ask the question of, I think I can do that by myself and what is taken off their plate by involving somebody else professional, like a therapist or a coach through the process. But the pressure that really is relieved from that person of having to hold all that on their own and why that professional is guiding that and what guiding it looks like. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this brings up for you. And always please reach out as you have questions about what you hear. Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us as we continue our conversations and education around full therapeutic disclosures. We're going to talk in a little bit more detail about what you can expect when you show up with a choose coach or therapist and you say, okay, I'm ready. Okay, maybe I'm not ready, but I think I want to be ready, or I want to try to be ready. We want to go forth. We want to do this. What does that look like? What do those steps actually look like? And we're going to start with what that might look like for the betrayer. So if you are the one in the relationship that did the betraying and you have agreed, you're willing to go through this process and give full disclosure, full truth to your partner, and you show up and you say, okay, what does this even freaking look like? What do I do? What's the first step? We're going to go through that with you today. I'm going to defer, Luke, to you since you work more often with the betraying partner. I just going to leave it in your court. Like, when someone shows up and says, okay, Luke, think I'm ready, scared, but I think I'm ready. What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the betrayer and I are working together. We're going to kick this thing off with the preparation piece, which is, okay, emotional stability. How am I feeling about this whole situation? Be able to check in with those parts that are like, this feels wrong. This feels like I shouldn't be doing this. This feels like this is the end. So we're going to check in on that part. And we're going to bring some stability emotionally to that situation. We're going to have some
Can you
tools.
can you slow that down? Like, what do you say to that? I feel like this is going to be the end. This feels wrong. This feels like I'm just going to hurt them more. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, just validating that. Just validating just that how horrible it feels to let go of that piece of, if I go here, it's going to be the beginning of the end, which sounds weird. That's a stabilizing experience, but it is to go, how scary is this? And then as soon as we do a little bit of that, and there's some techniques inside of that, some grounding exercises, techniques we go through, then that person tends to go, okay, connect back to my values, the why. Why am I doing this? Then we can get into the why. Does that answer your question, Alana?
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe what I was hoping for is even like speaking to those people who are listening right now,
Being
who are
connected.
literally this second having those same thoughts and fears. Like,
Yeah.
maybe can you validate them? Because I know that there's people listening to this that their partner has said, I want this. And they're like, okay, I want to save my relationship. But every part of me is screaming, what the heck are you even thinking? Why would I do this?
Alana, I can, and would you be open to talking to them? Because I love when I hear you talk to them because you're actually the betrayed. I do it, but do you mind talking to them?
Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is usually when I have somebody who has betrayed their partner and I am working with the partner who's been hurt and is healing, I will take time to always go meet the person who is doing this. And the very first thing that I'll say, and this with all sincerity, is the fact that you are considering doing this and stepping into this truth takes courage and it takes bravery. And I am really proud of you for being willing to do this.
Mhm.
And I have to be sensitive with this because as a betrayed partner, to have anyone take time to slow down and validate the person who's hurt me, that can be really painful, but it doesn't change the fact that they are choosing to be honest in this way in front of these people. And it is terrifying and it is scary.
Yeah.
And so it takes courage to do that. And I respect this step forward that you're considering. And so I do, just like you, Luke, I validate that we're asking you to let go of the outcome. We're asking you to step fully into all of the fear and all of the discomfort and to look at your shame and move forward anyway. A, because that's healing for you, and B, because that's healing for your partner. And both of you need and deserve that healing.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Well, I'm glad that you said that too, because a couple who's stepping into this process is trying to salvage their relationship. And so even though there's all of this hurt and layers of pain, underneath is the hope and desire of love being restored. And so I think it is important for those who are stepping into this, and especially just as a company, like people that come to choose, I do feel like it's important to reiterate and speak publicly about how we really view both partners.
Mhm.
And so I concur with what you're saying there, Alana. It can be easily assumed that if I'm working with a betrayed partner, that when I get in front of the betrayer, I have daggers, or I'm like,
Mm.
you suck, or I can't believe you did this because I've heard everything that you've done to her. It can be easily assumed that that would be my positions as working with betrayer's partner, but it's not at all how it goes. There's a deep level of humanity that I hold for all peoples and professionalism
Yeah.
and a deep understanding of, like you use that word, bravery and courage that it takes to lean in to truth, to lean into vulnerability, to lean into something like this. So I'm glad that you slowed that down and brought that up. I didn't think about that before, but I feel like that is really huge to publicly state as a company that this is how we approach it. This is really how we think. And even though, as you validated, it could be triggering to a betrayed partner to show any type of understanding or whatever word comes for you, like warm, whatever you feel like is being given to this betrayer, I also validate how that can be triggering. And like I was saying before, I do believe that underneath all of the layers of that pain and hurt is love. And if we are helping you facilitate your journey towards restitution and reconciliation, then I think that the level of respect for what you each are doing must be present in the professionals you choose to help facilitate this.
For sure.
Absolutely. So we get that groundedness, that emotional stability in place. What we'll do is we'll walk through and give them what all of a sudden starts to make sense, which is like, oh, I don't have to just show up and come up with a whole bunch of history because I can't remember this all, a process. So I just want to introduce you to that and let you know a little bit more about it, those that are listening. So the first thing we do is we start to talk through and go through the tools and resources that are now available to them. It's online. It's in something we call a portal. I'll introduce them to that portal. And what it will do is it will start to introduce things like the template for the experience, which is, okay, we go through a series of different types of behavior. And instead of having to comb back through all of time, we'll go through different types of sexual behavior and we'll go, does this apply? Does this apply? And go through and help gain understanding. Because a lot of times it's like, I didn't know that one matters, or I didn't even know what that was. And we do some psychoeducation / does this apply? And we go through those one at a time. And then what we also do to build out the disclosure is The betrayed actually has filled out a needs assessment. And what we'll do is we'll go through and build in what they want to know in the disclosure. They will go through and understand what the needs are from the disclosure. Like, I want to know frequency. I want to know types of behavior. I want to know who, if there was other people involved. So we'll go through and make sure we are in alignment and understand what's going to go inside of that. And what we'll also do is understand, and I mentioned this before, the template, which is how I build all this in. Because, for example, with my ADHD, I need to be slowed down through the process and say, okay, let's tackle this now. Anyway, so that's what we'll do in preparation for the disclosure. And it's interesting, I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but picture something that you really want to do, like spring cleaning, or I don't know, clean out a closet, or maybe a garage, something you only get to every once in a while. You hate it, but as soon as you start to dig into it, you're like, oh, this is what I was supposed to be doing. And it feels good to get started. And that's typically what I get is I don't know where to start. And then you get started. It's like, okay, now I'm gaining some momentum. The pressure's starting to become lessened as we're walking through it.
And I imagine psychologically speaking too, it's once you get your brain in that space, in that mode of digging up truth and putting timeline together and looking at your behaviors and really being present in that, then a lot of those of you who are worried about, am I going to remember everything or am I going to leave something out? There is something to be said about putting your brain in that space and things will start to come, which is why the intentionality matters. If you're, excuse my French, half-assing this, then the likelihood of you missing something is present. But when we've seen over the years, betray partners do this and they are putting the time and the effort, they're coming up with stuff left and right. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, because the way that it works in the brain.
What I see in this process too is when you're doing a disclosure that's a couple months out, as you're doing this, like you said, Amie, stuff will come up and you remember stuff. But then there's processing that comes up around that. So it is not uncommon to have shame responses come up as they're preparing for the disclosure. It's not uncommon for people to have relapses preparing for the disclosure. And if you hear that and all of a sudden you have the massive panic, it can be scary because when we've spent so much time, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. And then now we're going to make space and think about it, which we need to do, which is a healthy part of moving forward and processing, but it will stir stuff up. So even part of our process is creating a relapse prevention plan. And what do we do if that happens as we're preparing for disclosure? Because that's not unheard of.
Right.
And so it is really important that we take this with eyes wide open of those potentials, but it gives us this opportunity to process as we go. When we do a full disclosure in an intensive, that's something that we have to notice. And there's pros and cons. If you do a disclosure where you're preparing for it for a couple months, you come and we give it versus you fly in somewhere and we're doing disclosure prep from start to finish and giving it in like a 3-day window. You lose some of that deeper level processing that you would get over the few months, which that processing can happen in the months following, but you lose that. One of the benefits you gain is when you are away from your everyday life and you are in this nonstop in an environment that feels very safe and that's all you have to focus on, you can dig deep in a different way. And so there's pros and cons to however you do the disclosure. But I say that because you do have options on how you move forward. But we give you this guidance and this structure. And even Luke, you mentioned the template. That template has on it, okay, here's where you put your history timeline. Here's some of the things we need to make sure we're doing on there. We're not writing a narrative. It's not storytelling. We're not painting a picture. We're giving facts. We're talking about frequency. We're talking about when, where. We're being specific. If we need to have ages included, we put ages. We put timeline of where this was, of where you were in your job or your career, where you were in your relationship. Those are all included in the timeline. But then even with that, we also include finances spent. we include types of emotional abuse that was used to protect the acting out behavior. We make a list of lies that were told to facilitate the lying and the hiding.
I
The-
want to highlight real quick how
Yeah.
unique that is, because I have met with multiple clients who have done a quote disclosure and that has not been included. And it is still something that their brain loops around or wishes they had some closure to or acknowledgement of. So I just wanted to highlight that. That is something that I am proud of that we do. That's not often done. So
It's part of the emotional abuse
yeah, acknowledging
type
the
of abuse.
abusive behaviors and destructive behaviors that hide and hid the acting out.
Mhm. So you'll notice, Alana, like you just rattled off like a bunch of different things. So how in the world would you capture that if you just were doing that by yourself, right? That's what I highlight there is
Uh,
that needs to be guided. Me as a professional, you're here with me. I'm guiding that process to uncover the different types of abuse, to be able to uncover the different types of acting out behaviors, frequency, duration, names of people as appropriate, putting that into a timeline. There's so much that goes into it.
in like that, like the names, there are times where we will use a name because it is important. If you know the person, we're going to use their name. But if you don't know the person, unless the partner has specifically asked for a name, we do not use a name because now every Jennifer that you'll ever meet becomes a triggering name. And there's a million Jennifers out there. So little details like that, or I just think about the amount of full disclosures from where it starts when they first say, okay, I'm done. Look at my timeline. And then they go through it with their coach or their therapist who is already working with them and says, hey, include this, maybe not this. Then it goes through who's working with the betrayed partner. And when we come through it, that full disclosure, our brain is thinking what is going to be harmful and what is going to be helpful. And so if there are harmful pieces of information, like for example, somebody put, yeah, because I really like the color red on other women. I was like, that's not helpful. It's not, because now any woman ever who's wearing red becomes a potential trigger for this poor woman. And so that's not helpful information. And so we then go through with that lens. So from where it starts to where it gets, where it is actually ready for the partner, where it's thorough, it's complete, it is detailed to the level that she needs it, but it is not going to create this movie in her brain that needs to and wants to relive it over and over and over again. That's a really complex process that we do not want somebody who has spent their life in hiding using that brain that's still healing, using that by itself to come up with all of this.
Right.
And the part, I wish y'all could just have a front row to the amount of back and forth that like Alana and Amie and I have through this process so much. Because all I really want the person that did the betraying to do is show up and brain dump. Like just brain dump, just give it to me. Let me support you and help you in that. And then we will guide you through that process. And the back and forth, there's a lot. And I'm talking about the
Hours.
good way. Hours and hours.
Hours.
And it's good. I'm not
And I
saying
want to validate how that could be frustrating too, to the betrayer when we are asking them to go back and redo this section. There's blame shifting in there. I need you to go back and I need you to redo this section. This isn't helpful. I also want to just give you a heads up. Like that can be really, really frustrating to have to here. You just gave it. And now we're like, for lack of a better word, nitpicking through it. And so I want to prepare and just throw that out there. That's possible. That's happened often when we go through this. And I would just say, please step into that process as well and take that as more additional learning for yourself. We're doing it for a reason. We're trying to help create and cultivate healthy thinking. Like, I don't know which one of you said that, but if we're bringing something to your attention, this is another opportunity for you to go, oh, this is a healthier way to approach or share or have empathy or be aware of my partner. So it can be frustrating. And I would just encourage you all to continue to learn from it through the whole process.
And we're doing it to protect both of you.
Yes.
If I were about to stick my foot in my mouth and my partner was going to get mad at me and someone like went, oh, hey, hold on, Alana. If you say that, this is how it will probably come across. Please stop me from sticking my foot in my mouth. And so I do that to protect the person who is sharing in that vulnerability. And I do it to protect the person who is listening in their vulnerability.
Yeah, and what comes to my mind is I totally hear you, Amie, and that's so right. There's men that are like, man, I'm really trying hard to get this right. And there's also a bunch of men that are like, thank you for giving me some direction, Amie, on making sure I don't put my foot in my mouth and Alana. So there's just the experience. And I was thinking about couples, listening to somebody the other day saying, so grateful for our couples therapist who self has navigated learning how to talk. This is just another version of this
Mm.
for the future, like you're talking about, Amie.
Yeah. So all of that goes in like part one of the full disclosure. But we do, for the person who is trying to work their recovery, they have the part one, which was all of that. Part two is creating a safety plan. And then part three is a letter of restitution. Luke, can you explain what you do with that safety plan? Because I don't know of any other companies who are actively doing a safety plan. Maybe you all will start doing it when you hear this, and please do. But yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. So what we build into that safety plan is he'll take his history. So he'll notice themes, experiences. And now since it's all timed out, and this is the beauty, now I can build something that's going to create safety for myself and my partner off of my history. So what you'll build into your safety plan is like my dailies. So I recognize like porn isn't my problem. It's a solution to my problem. The problem is I don't know how to get connection in a healthy way. I don't know how to get feeling vigorous about life. I want to tackle this. So things that make me feel motivated. I don't know how to get calm and peace inside my body. So there's daily things that are built in through a safety plan. There's also things we call barriers, not like boundaries, but we call them barriers, which are things that keep me from understanding where I need to have blocks in my life to keep me from acting out. There are also in a safety plan abilities to be able to see levels of behavior, like what's behavior that keeps me safe, what's stuff that's tends to be close call behavior, where it's my inner circle behavior. So what we'll do is we'll go through and also identify our support network, our recovery capital, and those people that are going to help me on my journey that's not my partner, that are going to help me stay sober and clean. So there are various things that are created inside that safety plan. So I don't just dump on my partner all these things that I did that are crappy, but I also show up and say, hey, this is my history. This is what I've identified as problematic, and this is what I'm going to do going forward. So they are left with understanding of what this could look like.
As I'm listening to you, the word that just keeps sticking out for me is the barriers. Because I think as a partner, knowing that my significant other were creating boundaries for themselves and having barriers felt so much safer to me. So I wanted to know like what there's different times where it's like, I wanted to give you all the boundaries, like, don't do this, don't do this. But it is so different when the person who has done the betraying, just like you said, identifies them and then comes forward and goes, look, here's the areas where I've run off the road. Here's where I'm reinforcing. Here's where I need to do all of that. So, Luke, do you mind just really quick? When you created that word barriers, you didn't create the word, but when you pulled that in instead of boundaries, will you just give the imagery around that? Because that to me really resonated. And it's something that I want to retain for my clients.
Yeah. There's this thing for the whole time we've been in our journey where men weaponize this word and they say, I need boundaries too. Like my partner says they have boundaries. When do I get boundaries? I'm like, okay, bear with me on this. If you're the person that was betrayed, yeah, you need boundaries, but in a way different way. You need boundaries within yourself to keep you from acting outside your values. So let's give it a different word so we stop triggering the heck out of everybody. So called it barriers because that's what keeps me, just like I'm driving down the road. If I'm headed down the road, I have something that might be a white line that determines like me between me and when I leave the road. But if I'm next to a cliff, it might be a really giant piece of cement, a barrier that keeps me from running off the side of the road. So I've established and learned about dangerous part or problematic parts of my life where I need barriers that represent the danger that's on the other side that keep me in the place. Those are called boundaries. They're things that help us keep safe. But I wanted to use barriers because it more, I think, accurately depicts the journey of somebody's overcoming compulsive behavior to create safety.
And I think about like the lines on the road. No matter how far you go down the road in your journey, we're still going to have those lines. We're still going to have those guides that tell us, here's where the road is. Because I think sometimes we have this idea that we work this recovery and then we get to this place where it's like, okay, now we can just off road wherever we want. We don't need to worry about it because we're good now. But really, healthy living is we do have these guidelines that we live by, our values, our morals, what we're okay with, what we're not okay with. And we know that there's certain places that we just have barriers that are just more unsafe. But we keep, no matter how far we go down the road, there's still places with barriers. There's always there lines on the road because that's just healthy living moving forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
I hear women, I can hear women saying, but I want to be the one to make sure, yeah, you can go look. I want to be the one to make sure that he knows what those barriers are because I feel like I know those barriers more than he does. And I want to, number one, validate that. And I have done this in the past where I will say, tell me what you want in that safety plan. What would help you feel safe? And I would give it to, it's usually Luke that I work with. So I would give it to Luke to help use that as a guide because I do think that it's important to take your partner's fears and worries into consideration when you are putting together this safety plan. But I don't want to take away from what Luke was saying before is this is part of the process for you as a betrayer to come up with and know this for yourself. And there can be a little collab here as well. So I don't want to leave the betrayed partner out of this. Your voice matters. And so if there is something that you're feeling like, look, in order for me to feel safe and know that he is not going to drive off the cliff, I would like to see this. And that is communicated as part of the process. So I'm excited.
I love that you talked about that collaboration because that's really what it is. And it's a discussion because the partners who I'm working with who have betrayed, who are actually really working their recovery, I hear I want to create that safety for my spouse. I want to create that safety for my partner. And they still need to do the individual work to figure out what is in their value system. What is their areas of weakness? What are their levels of denial? And all of those things have to be taken into account. But that doesn't mean we go, hey, partner, I got to do my own work. Sorry, you're over here. We absolutely hear from them what you need as a partner for your safety and take that into consideration in the whole process completely. Okay, so then the restitution letter. This is part 3 of the work that the person who's working recovery does. They create a letter of restitution. Luke, what does that look like?
So it's a letter that speaks to the betrayed, saying, after I've done all this work, this is how I see that my behavior has impacted you in your life. And the betrayed gets a chance to hear from that person what they're seeing. And it's not what they're seeing, but they get a chance to see the whole picture.
I usually give a disclaimer with this. I don't know, Amie, if you do
I was going to
this.
say, I was like, this, I always do. Yep.
Okay. So Amie, tell me how yours sounds different. But my disclaimer to my betrayed partner is, look, this gives us a snapshot of where they're at. Very rarely will this ever, you'll walk away going, oh my gosh, they get it. Wonderful. That's not the normal response. But the normal response is, I can see where they're at. I can see they're on that level of trying to get, and it gives me more information. And it still is healing to have the level of what I have. We still have the impact letter later for the partner after that, which then they will get to see and understand even more. But I give that disclaimer that we're not going in this as a partner looking to just go, oh my gosh, they understand every ounce of my pain, because one of the hardest places of my own personal journey was letting myself actually, I don't know what the word is, know, believe, actually understand that he will never understand it to the level I experienced it. He's not capable of it. He can try, and it's important that he tries, and it's important he taps into his own pain to be able to have empathy for my pain. But in the way that I experienced it, he won't ever be able to experience that. And I had to let that go.
That takes radical acceptance.
Ah, it's a hard one.
Yeah, that's a hard one for a lot of my partners. So
It's funny.
Yeah.
I like want to ask both partners, like, how do you feel about that? Like, you're here. Like, how do you feel about the betrayer making an attempt to share what he thinks you experience or what he sees that you've been through? Like, how do you feel about getting that? And then I'd like to hear the other part of that too.
Amie, did you sound any different of what you talk to your clients about? Your disclaimer?
no, this is seriously what I say. I really do want to prepare them. I want to prepare them for disappointment. I'll just say it, because the expectation that I see tends to be higher than what the reality allows. And we have to remember that this is not phase 3 work. This disclosure is coming in between phase 1 and phase 2. And so I see a lot of grief that comes when they receive this. And grief is phase 2. Grief that your partner doesn't fully get it yet. And like you said, might not fully comprehend the level that I know you betrayed partners are wanting. That's why it's so important for you to do your own work and validate yourself in such big ways. So I look at it as this, I prepare them for grieving. Uh,
So let me ask a question on behalf of the betrayer. If I'm not able to really get it anyway, even after all that work, why would they want to even know it? Why, if it's just painful to hear, why would you want it? Why would they want
some attempt is better than none. And it is a reality check. It does show the betrayed partner where their partner is. And I think that's important moving forward. And I think it's important for the betrayer to step into that space. And that's where the empathy piece is, right? Really not cognitive empathy, but really tapping into more of that affective empathy. Can you go there? And that's a huge part of recovery, is to have empathy. So I think this is a tool to help facilitate some of that. I think what we're trying to do here is prepare that it doesn't always meet the level of expectation that I see a lot of my partners have. And so I think what we're trying to do here in this episode is just caution or prepare you for that expectation. But when I say grief, also, that isn't a bad thing. That's necessary and part of the healing journey. I think it helps facilitate that, which is necessary along the way. There's going to be a lot of grieving. Remember this, we've mentioned this throughout our whole series, is that going through disclosure doesn't just wrap this all up and we're good now. And like Alana, your analogy, now we can go off roading and we're fine. That's not what this is. Your emotions that are still going to probably be big and hard are part of this experience. But Luke, you started off with helping them establish and assess their emotional stability. So that's that window of tolerance. Can we process these hard emotions? Can we feel them? Can we learn to navigate them where it isn't destructive anymore?
Yeah. The thing that keeps going through my mind is my addict brain goes, even through the disclosure process, like, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Like,
Mm.
I'll do the disclosure because I heard that's what healing's about. And then we can get to healing. And I really want to be in that relationship with them. And I think the restitution letter caps that off. Like, what's in it for me? If I do it right, then that means that they will feel better. And ultimately, that means that we'll be able to work this thing out. What's in it for me? Nothing. Nothing. Like, what's in it for me is nothing. It's giving her a look inside of my brain to see what this is all about.
Yeah. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and what this looks like for the betrayed partner. So if you have been betrayed and you show up and now you and your partner are working towards this disclosure process, what does this look like for you? And I think the first thing that we'll cover, like what Luke was saying, is the emotional regulation. We got to work through managing some big triggers, getting you into that window of tolerance and staying there a little bit longer than maybe you have before. When you have a lot of triggers that are happening, it's not often in my work with clients where we are creating a little bit more separation through this process to give more of that stability. It can be really easy to be activated knowing that your partner is coming up with all of this truth and it's there. It can stir up a lot of stuff. Really working with my partner on getting that emotional regulation, having them take care of that with support, other resources, managing those triggers with what they can control. And so that's a huge piece because we've got to be able to hold that space to hear some pretty activating information. So learning coping skills and tools to help with that is where we start. Anything additional on that one, Alana, before I move on?
Sometimes it will feel as a betrayed partner, like I'm not doing enough working towards a disclosure because a lot of my betrayed partners can be very task oriented.
Yeah.
And when we're doing emotional regulation and working through the triggers and getting your body regulated and grounding, sometimes that can feel of like, no, I should be like creating some kind of list, or I should be like, give me the tasks, which is all very cognitive.
Mhm.
But the type of work we need to do with starting is that emotional regulation. And so I just validate those cognitive parts of you that's like, no, give me the checklist. I need to go on to the next things. Sometimes this part of it can feel like you're not doing enough, but it is exactly what we need to do. That's my number one focus overall with the betrayed partner is
Mhm.
preparing them and their bodies to be able to hear all this information and be able to actually metabolize it, to hear it. We were talking about full disclosures yesterday in our training meeting at Choose, and somebody said, even if you've had a full disclosure, if it was done poorly, your body would have been so dysregulated that your ability to metabolize all that information would be totally different than if you redid it the right way and heard it in a safe environment and was able then to process it. Your body would be able to move through that so much better and differently. And I just thought that was such a great insight.
It's a completely different experience. And the other thing that the reason why I focus on this, and I love that you brought that up, Alana, because yeah, it can feel very frustrating. And I've heard that articulated before. But one of the reasons why this is important is when you can shift your focus from your partner and what they're doing as part of the disclosure and onto you and paying attention to your triggers and your ruminating thoughts and the things that are coming up and activating, this is actually what's going to help you prepare the questions. A lot of times I'll get clients that'll say, I don't even know what questions to ask. Okay, we need to start paying attention to you and pay attention to your body and your questions and your rumination and everything that's happening. And guess what? We're going to have questions come up from that. And I know we're going to get to that in just a minute. There's a reason also with emotional regulation that for me, I have in mind, because what you're going to be noticing most likely is activation and what's the word I want to use? I was going to say stuck, just this sense of feeling stuck or like you just come up against this wall and you just keep hitting it over and over. There's a question there that your brain hasn't been able to find the puzzle piece to most of the time. So there's a reason underneath it too, why I push for the emotional regulation piece. All of us here want to validate as a betrayed partner the anger that can come up for you when you are stepping into this process around anger around the money, anger around how long it might even be taking for your partner to give you truth. when you have begged for it, pleaded for it, when they've told you they've given it to you and you're realizing they haven't, the anger that can come up from that, the anger around the money, I just really want to highlight and validate. And can we all just speak to that for a minute? It's a big deal.
When my anger stage hit, I sat in sadness, like in deep sadness for a long time. And I remember being confused that I wasn't angry. When the anger stage hit for me, it came in like a full blaze of glory. It was intense. But one of the big pieces of that was why do I have to heal? I didn't do anything wrong. Why do I financially have to pay for this? Why do I have to take time out of my day to go to therapy? Why do I have to emotionally hurt? There were so many pieces of it that felt so unfair and I was so angry about. And for a lot of individuals, I see women especially with this, but I see this in men too. But in a lot of individuals, I see a lot of fear around anger.
Mm.
That if I let myself be angry, either I'll always be angry or I'll just become a bitter person or I'll hurt somebody either emotionally or physically with the anger. And so there's a lot of fear around the anger, but the anger gives us information on where we need to have healing. And anger is those feelings moving. The emotions are moving and that's good.
It's an action emotion.
Yeah.
And usually it's because you need some boundaries. And so even if that is, I'm angry that the finance that I'm paying for this, then we probably need to strategize on how that looks for you individually. I was working with a client who I've actually done this several times where at one point she decided, my client, to separate checking accounts. And she's like, I just cognitively, visually need to not see that come out of my account. And so we went with it. It's like, great. Let's separate the accounts, and that money for the disclosure you're not going to see that leave because it was too triggering for her. And so that was an agreement that her and her partner made. So we can get creative with that. But I just want to really validate that when you didn't make this rupture in the relationship, and now it feels like you're literally paying for it. Yeah, there's anger. And like you're saying, Alana, it's a valid emotion. It's giving you some good information. Maybe we need to do some more protecting or moving in a different direction or creating some boundaries.
And anger is part of the grieving process. And so if we can remember it is part of the healing, and then we can again work through that, channel it. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but it can feel scary, especially when you're engaging in all of this.
Yeah. The next thing we do is just go through what you need, what you are needing from this disclosure, validating that for you, getting clear on that for you. Again, there's a lot of collaboration as professionals through this process. So I'm communicating that with whoever's working with the betrayer. This is what my client needs. This is what their partner needs to see and what they're hoping for. And then from that, we start formulating the questions. What you need to know, because remember, this is your right of truth. What truth do you need? What information do you need? And I'm there to help guide that because, again, like we talked about before, there are some questions that it may feel like you need to know. And yet sometimes it's going to do more damage than good. And so having someone guide you through that a little bit more inquisitively can help define whether it really is a need or not.
Well,
Helpful.
and same with what you do, Luke and Amy. I'm going to guess you do this. We brain dump the questions. If it's a question, you put it down.
Get it all out.
I don't even care if your question is full of explicits because you need to just get it out there. What you put down initially is not what we're going to send over. We're just going to get it all out. Then together we go through it and we make sure that we are bringing the questions that you need to know and that will also be helpful and beneficial to your healing. Because sometimes there's questions we want to know that we go, absolutely, I want to know this. And then as we start digging into it, we go, oh, there's actually a deeper question in this. And then we dig down and what's that deeper question? I remember one time I had a client and she had 8 different questions all around the same theme. And I could tell we weren't hitting, like there was something in each of they were all similar but different. And so we spent a whole session on just those questions. And by the end, we got down to there was this core hurt that she had that happened in her childhood that was presenting in her marriage and that felt especially painful with the acting out behavior. That was at its core. And so then when we really discovered what all the other questions were about, she was like, no, forget all those questions. This is what I want to know. Yeah. And so that's part of the process with the partner question is there's a lot of healing and processing that happens in your own individual sessions around the questions. Yeah. Or that can happen, doesn't have to.
So then those questions, once we fine tune them, those get sent over to whoever's working with the betrayer. And those are incorporated and included in that full disclosure. So you're going to get not only what your partner has laid out and worked through with their coach, their therapist, they are going to now include all of these questions. And that hopefully feels comforting, validating. This is your truth. You are going to finally get this. And to know that those questions are being handed over. And then it's another process, Luke, of then going through. And I've seen this happen a couple times. You all with me have seen this happen where they get the questions and it's like, well, I've already answered that. And they can be dismissed or looked over. But how my partner asks the question, it gets stated and answered. Not just, well, I already answered that in section 2. No, you're going to read the question that my partner asked and you're going to answer it. There's something so healing in that rather than just being told, well, I already answered that. That's one of those things that we've gone through and fine tuned. No, that's unhelpful. So real care is my point, is there's real care. And I'm going to use the word like a sacredness around honoring your questions and having them answered because this is what you need. This is what you have a right to, like we talked about in day 1.
Can I just put really quick too? One thing I always tell my partners is you don't have to think of every question because this is not a one and done. We close the book and you can't ask more questions.
Glad you said that.
This is such a fear that comes up with almost all of them.
Yes.
Is this, I feel so much pressure with the questions because I have to think of everything because this is my only opportunity to ask questions. And that is not the case. This is the beginning of many more conversations and probably other questions that will come up later. And even in the full disclosure process, if a question comes up outside of what you've already thought of, we will ask that question and you'll get that answered. And so we can let go of that. I have to ask everything. I have to think of everything. That's why you have that support team to help. And that's why this is the opening the door for the two of you to continue in talking and communicating and learning how to ask and answer these questions.
Yeah, I'm so glad you added that. It's so true. And we've seen that every single time. Additional questions throughout that disclosure process. And we honor that. The last thing that we do with the betrayed partner is write an impact letter. So like we were talking about before, Luke, you were saying how you help your person, the betrayer, write a letter of impact. This is how I feel like my actions have impacted you. Now as a betrayed partner, you get to give actual voice to how this has impacted you.
Yeah.
That's something that's really important. And we'll talk just a little bit more about that. But can I ask you a question, Luke?
Yes, please.
I would like to hear how you prepare betraying partners to receive that.
Yeah. Just, it's all the work they've done. Just, I don't want to say culminating, but separating yourself from your behavior. You got a chance to look at all out of it, recognizing that you are not your addiction. And the reason is because when you can show up, when she reads that impact letter to you, not making it about you, just being there, being present with her. This is about her and her experience, not about you. And Alana, you looks like you want to say something.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. When you say not make it about you, you're saying that person's not making it about their shame. They're not making it about their pain with how hard it is for them to hear about their choices. They're not making it about, I'm so sad because I realize how much I hurt you, but now it's all about them again.
Yeah,
So
thanks for
setting
clarifying.
all of that aside, and you're just being there with the person who's been betrayed and hearing their experience.
Because emotional immaturity would be, oh, I guess I am really a piece of crap. Like, man, like I really screwed it up. That's making it about me, right? That's so like for somebody that wrote an impact letter and you just sit there in your own stuff and going like, so separate yourself from your behavior as far as like, I can be with you, recognize and take accountability for my actions and hear what this has actually been like for you and not go to my own self-loathing. Right? That's separating my behavior from myself and my ability to be able to connect to you in that experience. Thanks for
And
slowing down, Alana.
And more often than not, with where the person's at in their individual work, who's working recovery, they need the help of their support person to do that, to stay regulated, to stay present with their partner, to be able to stay in the present moment and listen and hear, needs to have that support person outside of them. Otherwise, it is so easy to get emotionally hijacked because when a partner is putting their heart and soul into the impact and that impact is intense, it's not easy emotional work. So this is again another reason why I really beg and plead you to have good, solid professionals helping you through this process.
And then if the betrayer has done that work, it is, I hope this is an okay word to use, beautiful watching them sit together and heard the betrayed share that experience and them connect around that experience. Oh my God. Like painful and beautiful.
And for the betrayed partner with the impact letter, we just don't sit down and say, here you go. We actually have guides and prompts and slow it down for you to help you think about the different areas you've been impacted and help you find ways that fits within the way that you work and your brain works and your personality works to write a letter that works for you. But we just don't send you off and go, okay, just write all your impacts. You're good to go.
That's so
See,
overwhelming. I hear that all the time. Like, where do I even freaking start? And so, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. There are guides, there's prompts, you can put in categories, whatever works for your brain. I like having my partner start this fairly soon because it does take time. And I think there's so much overwhelm, the tendency to go into overwhelm during this process, often been left off of the process, unfortunately, because it can be so overwhelming.
if it's left off, it's almost always the betrayed partner. In my case, that's who has left it off. And what I have learned as a professional, I used to give them and I'd say, take as much time as you need. But what was happening is it would become painful to go and open that up and then shut it and then open it and shut it and open. And so now I give them 2 weeks. From the time that we start till the time you finish, we do 2 weeks, which then allows you to stretch it out. But we're not going to spend the next 6 months constantly having to reopen the wound. And so that's something I do now is we have a window of time with guides to do the full disclosure or the impact letter. And that has now changed to now almost all of my women do impact letters or my betrayed partners.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it just kept getting dragged out because it's hard, but we'll guide you.
Hey, so there's a lot. There's a lot of pieces that go into it. And the beautiful thing is if you're the one going through it, you just can trust the process. Find professionals that you trust and who understand. And if you're willing to bring your walls down and do this work, then you can be guided and you can trust the process and then let go of the outcome. And there's a lot of pieces to it. And each of these pieces adds blocks to that healing. So, what we'll cover next week in full disclosures, it possibly will be our last one. We will re-air the episode with Jared Rockwell. He is our polygraph examiner that we use here. He used to be a therapist. We did a wonderful episode with him. We're going to re-air that one. So it's with this set and you don't have to go dig for it. But then we're going to do an episode next week on why disclosure is not the end and what do we do next. That big now what? We did all this work and then where do we go? So stay tuned for next week. As always, as listeners, thanks for hanging out with us this week. Luke, thank you for bringing your expertise. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Hi, this is Hallie Roderick with Choose Recovery Services, and I wanted to share with you a group that I run called Empowerment After Betrayal. And this is specifically for men who are experiencing betrayal trauma due to infidelity and betrayal in your relationship. And in this group, I strive to create a safe space where you can show up and be authentic and connect with other men who are experiencing the similar things. I provide tools and resources along the way that will help you in your own healing. And we meet every week on Mondays at 5:30 Mountain. I'd love to have you join us if this is something that would benefit you. And you can learn more about registering by going to the show notes below or checking out the information on chooserecoveryservices.com.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.